Sports fans,
sports lovers.
welcome back to another episode of Global Sports from a Caribbean perspective, the ultimate place for all things sports. The best games, the best takes, the best teams, the best players, all on a Caribbean perspective. And I'm your host today, Shabba, and I'm here with
Dubs.
And as usual, we have a packed show for you today. We're going to get straight into things with our This Day in the History before we speak about those lovely Champions League games that we saw today and yesterday. We'll then break down some of the NBA playoffs that's going on before we get into our Man of the Match segment before closing things out. So let's get straight into it. Today is April the 29th, and on this day in 2018, Spanish great Rafael Nadal equaled his Open era record for most wins at the same event with 11 at the Barcelona ATP title. So on this day, Rafa Nadal equaled his Open era record for most wins at the same event. Also on this day,
Big up Andre Agassi, one of my favorite tennis players, probably the fourth tennis player, male that I really got to know back in the day. So and it's his birthday. So big up Andre Agassi, one of the tennis greats, iconic ball-headed tennis player. So big up yourself, Andre.
Yeah, so very tennis coded today on April the 29th. So let's get straight into it and let's head straight to yesterday's game, which saw Paris Saint-Germain take on Bayern Munich at the Parc des Princes. And boy, was that a game. Probably one of the greatest games that we've seen in a long time. Probably the best game that we've seen since Bayern Munich's game against Real Madrid in the previous round. So PSG edged out Bayern Munich 5-4 in a history-making Champions League semi-final first leg. The reigning champions and the Bundesliga's top dogs served up an instant classic in the French capital, where two world-class attacks traded blows and a new record was set for goals in a Champions League semi-final. By the 58th minute, PSG, who fell behind to Harry Kane's penalty, were leading 5-2. 10 minutes later, however, Bayern dragged themselves within a goal to keep the tie firmly in the balance ahead of the second leg in Munich next week. Just to run through the goal scorers because there were many. Ousmane Dembele grabbed himself a brace as well as Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. Joao Neves was the other goal scorer for PSG, while Harry Kane, Michael Olise, Dayo Upamecano, and Luis Diaz were on target for the Germans. So where do we begin? There were a few contentious penalty decisions as well. Both penalties that were awarded, I would say, had some shadow of controversy in them. We saw brilliant goals. But I don't think this game requires much overly tactical analysis because this is something that you'd see when you're playing an online friendly a seasons game on FIFA. This might as well be involved in the current NBA playoffs that we're seeing, the kind of game that we saw yesterday. It was a game for the football neutral to love. And why we watch football. Luis Diaz, Michael Olise, Desiree Doué, Ousmane Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, Joao Neves, the likes. It was a sight to see. Dappy, where do you want to begin?
Sure, boy. I think the only thing that was missing from this match was a big bowl of popcorn. Honestly speaking,
for real.
Was such a spectacle. And I mean, these are the matches that we come out to see. These are the matches that we sit on our couch and you just have to tip your hats to the coaches and the players, for going out there and trying to win the match as with a big of a goal tally cushion as possible. They didn't come out there with their tails behind the leg. They didn't approach it cautiously, and we knew that would have happened. But what we didn't expect is the amount of goals to be scored, and I expected it from PSG to win at least 3-2, but for them to concede 4 goals screams leaky. It screams.
This is the kind of thing that if, let's say, it was Barcelona in the position yesterday, this is the kind of thing that we would have criticized Barca for not knowing, when is enough.
Mhm.
Because I'd have to be very honest with you. When PSG went up 5-2, we mentioned that they went up 5-2. I was stunned. Like, to me, it seemed as though Bayern were being dismantled and they were being ripped apart every time that Paris went forward. And we saw this against Real Madrid in the previous round. They kept pushing their fullbacks up and it basically left one-on-ones with Dayo Upamecano and Jonathan Tah in the back versus Dembele and let's say Kvaratskhelia. So the fact that PSG's attack is more ruthless, this was always a
On the curve.
possibility, right? So when the score was at 5-2, I was actually so stunned and really thought that Bayern had no chance to come back and make it again. So the fact that Bayern got themselves back into the game, that showed a lot of resilience. A lot of resilience to me. I wouldn't say that I didn't know that they had, because come on, under Vincent Company, you hear him speak every time in a press conference or in an interview. He's very confident and very convictive of the style that they want to play. So I have no doubt that they're strong mentally. But seeing them come back into the game showed me a lot. And it really bodes well for them ahead of next week's second leg. I want to get into the penalty decisions. Firstly, the one in the first half with that actually led to the opening goal, right? That not Upamecano, Pacho on Luis Diaz. Penalty or not? What do you think? Because I thought it was a harsh decision. Watching it before the replay, I would have assumed it's a penalty. But looking at it on the replay, and maybe the slow motion doesn't do the tackle justice. But I thought he got some of the ball, and Luis Diaz left some of his leg in there to initiate contact. But I guess that's the modern game.
To be honest, bro, I didn't catch the penalty incident. So I really can't say much on it.
What about the one in the second half, though, the handball on Alphonso Davies? What do you think? The ball was crossed over. It deflected off of his thigh onto his arm. I mean, I could understand the arguments for it, but I think it was a bit harsh.
Yeah, bro. This is what I say, and I feel like it's another one of them letter the last thing. Once they see it a certain way, there's no way that it could be overturned. I feel for me personally, if the ball hits another body part and goes on to hit the hand, and you could see that there's no intention to play the ball with your hand, it should not be called a penalty. Despite what the rules say, this is why I'm talking about the human side of the game. You could see that the intention wasn't there to make his body bigger. If it comes off another body part inadvertently and hits the hand, then play on.
I agree, and it was a really harsh decision in my opinion, because, like you mentioned, it took a deflection off of his thigh onto his arm. But at the same time, I could understand why it was given, because his arm was somewhat away from his body, not fully extended away, but it was away from his body. So I can understand the call. But away from that, the goals were brilliant. I just want to highlight my favorite goal of the night, which was Luis Diaz's finish. When he collected the chip ball over the top from Harry Kane, and then he took it down over Marquinhos' head and then shimmied him and then placed it into the far corner. That was crazy, and just the level of attacking play that was on display from him and Olise and Kvaratskhelia, Dembele and Doué. That was certainly a sight to see.
One question I have: do you think that Luis Enrique and PSG should have tightened it up a little bit? And
yeah. That's exactly where I was getting to.
with the
When I mentioned that they were 5-2 up, and this is the kind of thing that we would criticize Barca for. I think they were playing basically reactive football, and not necessarily, because that's not within their game to drop back and be defensive, because even then Bayern would have come at them full stop, full throttle, and they would have had no choice. I guess their best form of defense is trying to attack in this situation. So I understand them continuing to go for the throat, but at some point, there must be a limit. And we saw late in the game that Nuno Mendes and Hakimi both pulled up with muscular injuries. We learned today that Hakimi is now going to be out of the second leg, which is going to be a big blow for them in Munich. So with that being said, what are your predictions for the second leg? Who advances?
I think I'm going to hop back on the train.
You think you're going to hop back on the
I
bench?
hopping back on the train, bro. Yeah, as I said, I really thought after what we saw from Bayern against Real Madrid that PSG would rip them apart. But I mean, we know that both teams have the quality and attack, and they could hurt one another. But I thought that PSG would have had more control over the game in certain stages, despite the quality that Bayern possess. With that being said, bro, I feel like Bayern are going to continue in their ways. You said Hakimi is out injured. Hakimi is playing on my partner side.
Yes.
Their side. So yeah, I like my chances there. I think that Bayern could actually. It doesn't have to be another high scoring game. It could be another just a 2-1 victory for Bayern Munich. I think both teams might be a little bit more cautious this time, and because of the home field advantage, I feel Bayern would get the victory this time.
And I could see that happening. I could definitely see that being the case, right? And before we came on air, we did some research to see what was the highest ever aggregate score over two legs in a semi-final, and we found out it was 13 goals. So this leg is currently at 9. So it only needs 4 more goals for it to be the highest ever semi-final of all time. I could definitely see that happening, at least in the first half, right? At least in the first half. I predicted 4-2 PSG in the first leg, right? Hakimi is going to be out. That's a big factor. I don't see it going anyway other than a high scoring affair. Probably another 1 goal margin. And seeing that I predicted PSG to go through in the semi final, I'm going to go with PSG to win 3-2 at the Allianz Arena and advance whatever that aggregate score would be. So we move on to today's fixture, which saw the Gunners take on Atletico Madrid at the Wanda Metropolitano Stadium. Arsenal and Atletico Madrid remain finally poised in their semi-final after a 1-all draw, which was a tale of 3 penalties. Victor Gyökeres and Julian Alvarez both scored from the penalty spot either side of halftime, but an overturned penalty decision on Eberechi Eze denied Arsenal a potential winner to take them back to the Emirates next week with an advantage. This game wasn't as, high flying and as exciting as yesterday's game was, as expected, to be fair. Both teams are known to be a bit defensive, although I would say that tag is a bit unfair to this version of Atletico Madrid. What are your thoughts on today's game, and what are your outlook for next week?
Arsenal would be happy to go home with the draw, 1-1. They would be unhappy with the call on Eze.
You think it was a pen?
Nah, bro. I think I don't think the touch was enough for him to react in that way. I think he dived. We playing ball, bro. If you approach me the way Hansko approach Eze, more than likely my momentum will carry me forward. Not in this spinning, twirling, swirling kind of way that Eze went down. So it showed me that he tried to add to the fall and try to sell it. And I agree with the referee not to buy what he was selling at all. It was a dive, and it did change the complexion of the game. However, Arsenal for large parts of the second half were on the back foot. I think Atletico drew some of these missed chances going to the Emirates, especially one from Lookman. Griezmann could have done a little better with the one that hit off the bar, I believe, as well. He has more quality to hit it and bring it lower.
Definitely.
Yeah, but after the penalty, Arsenal, I think, kind of took over the game and tried to press for that goal. But I don't think that they actually showed us enough to say that they're going to the Emirates to thump Atletico 2-1 goal. They might get the 1 goal, but I really see the next tie ending another draw. As I said, penalties. Atletico, if you get the chances and you finish, then I would stand corrected. But at this moment in time, I could only see this fizzling out into a draw.
Okay. I'd say that both parties are relatively content with a draw here going to the Emirates. Maybe Simeone would have wanted a win. I think he definitely fancies his chances going to the Emirates based on what he's seen today. Also, considering the fact that Arsenal has an ongoing title race against Man City, they play Fulham on the weekend, which isn't a run over. Fulham are going to come with physicality and quality in forward areas and challenge them on set pieces. So if Arsenal thinks they're gonna get an easy run on Saturday or Sunday, whenever that game is to be played, they're in for something else. Whereas Atletico are going to be fresh and rested, as they are not chasing anything in the league. So I think that Atletico may have the physical advantage, let's say, in the second half of the second leg, and that could tell late on, because I still think, despite the chances they missed today, they created a lot of great opportunities from open play to score on this well-renowned Arsenal defense. They have also better quality players in attack when you compare the likes of
I agree.
Martinelli and Madueke and Gyökeres compared to Lookman, Griezmann, and Julian Alvarez. I think that if they keep getting chances, that they will eventually punish Arsenal, and I don't see Arsenal carrying the same threat on the other at the other end to threaten Jan Oblak and the likes in Atletico's defense. Maybe the home crowd could be a factor in their advantage and in Atletico's disadvantage, especially mentally for Simeone as well, who probably would set up a bit more defensive at the Emirates. And that might be to their demise. But I went with Atletico advancing. Just like in the other game, I'm going to stick with my team who I thought would have advanced. I'm going to stick with Atletico to advance here. I predicted them to win 2-0 in the first leg today. The game draw 1-1. I am going to go with a 2-1 Atletico Madrid win at the Emirates.
Arsenal through on pens.
Arsenal, and Dappy has Arsenal through on pen. So from Dappy's end, it will be Bayern Munich versus Arsenal in the final. From my end, it will be Atletico Madrid versus Paris Saint-Germain. We'll tune in next week to see whose predictions are correct. And that wraps up the UCL coverage from this week. Before we head into the NBA, we just wanted to touch on La Liga title race, which is, we could say, is definitely over now after Madrid's 2-1 defeat. Well, 1-all draw. That felt like a defeat, I'd say. Real Betis scoring in the last minute. Any thoughts? Barca went to Getafe and won on the weekend 2-0 as well to stretch their lead to 11 points. I mean, the Clasico is still to come, but I don't think there's much anything left to talk about in Spain this season.
Not much to say, bro. There's another 90-minute goal conceded by Madrid yet again. It's like a lapse in concentration. In no sense I go on about it. Let me go to Barca. Barca, big up yourself. You did what you were supposed to do. Getafe came. You went to Getafe, which is a difficult match
Coliseum.
at the Coliseum, and you won 2-0. They did what they were supposed to. We didn't. And it's just simple as that, bro. I keep it clean cut.
Yeah, so although it's not mathematically confirmed, I think we can go out on a limb here and say congratulations to Barcelona for successfully retaining the La Liga title. A well-deserved victory. Before we move on to the NBA again, as we mentioned, only Arsenal played this weekend in the Premier League because Man City advanced to the final of the FA Cup, defeating Southampton, coming from behind to defeat Southampton. A somewhat rotated squad for Pep Guardiola as well. Meanwhile, Arsenal won 1-0 against Newcastle in struggling fashion. So Arsenal now have a game over City, but they're now 3 points ahead before both teams play this weekend. So we'll see how things shake out in the Premier League, and we'll discuss more on the next episode. So we'll head to the NBA, where things are certainly interesting. Not short on storylines for sure. Starting in the East, where each series still hangs in the balance. We'll start with the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers, with Boston currently leading 3-2. They had the chance to close out last night at home in Boston, but cold shooting from the 3-point line led to Philly coming out victorious. A great game from Joel Embiid, who returned in the previous game but had a great 30-point performance last night, as well as Tyrese Maxey and Edgecombe, who's shown to be very consistent recently, as well as Paul George. So shout out to Philly for extending the series. But this 3-point shooting that Boston is relying on, they're definitely gonna live and die by it. Do you see them closing out Game 6 in Philly, or does it go back to Boston for Game 7?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, bro, why not? It's Boston. I'm not gonna bet against them having two bad games, especially from shooting from behind the arc. Not going to bet against them having two bad games with the likes of Tatum and Jalen Brown. And then Pritchard, has been hot especially too. So, they have all the pieces, and I just feel like it was one bad game. The factor that we didn't key in before the series started was the Joel Embiid factor, and we saw that last night. Hopefully we could get another game like that, and they proved me wrong. No problem with that, but yeah, I feel like Boston had too much firepower, and I rate Joe Mazzulla highly as a coach, bro. So I feel like they would close it out in Philly.
I agree the talent gap. I agree with the talent gap. But I could see the series extending another game. Boston, I feel, play down to their competition sometimes and maybe overestimate their competition. Underestimate their competition, I'd say, and not necessarily play to their bestest ability. Now, their style of play is based around shooting threes, as I mentioned, and if they have a cold day from three, you could definitely beat them. But even with being cold from three last night, the game was very close until the end. And that was with Embiid having a great game. So with that being said, I don't see Boston shooting cold again from three like they did in the previous game. Although Derek White is struggling. He's struggling in the series big time. He is down 50% on his season average compared to the playoffs. So he needs to pick it up a bit, and maybe that's another reason why they lost last night. Their real players aren't stepping up as much as we would have expected. But I could see them closing out in Philly as well, and that game would probably be on Thursday and advancing to the second round. So we'll move on to the New York Knicks and Atlanta Hawks series. The Knicks also won last night to go up 3-2. They won in New York as well. Series is now headed back to Atlanta. Who do you see taking game 6?
I'll go in with New York. I'll go with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns to close it out in Atlanta. I think they have a better idea what they're doing than over in Atlanta. I think Atlanta don't really have the look at when CJ McCollum kind of went cold, and this is nothing new. And I think it's something that could continue and trickle down to the rest of the team. This is a pressure situation for them, so it's go hard or go home. And yeah, I don't feel like they have, even with CJ McCollum, I don't feel they have enough experience to handle that pressure and defeat the New York Knicks.
Experience is definitely the word which the Atlanta Hawks are currently lacking in this series, but they're not lacking for fight and athleticism. And they've shown to give New York a lot of trouble. More trouble than we probably expected as well. And I could see this game stretching to game 7. I could see Atlanta going home, the likes of Nikhil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson, along with CJ McCollum, just doing enough to edge out New York in game 6 and take it to a game 7 at Madison Square Garden, which will be cinema. So far for the series, I'd say that Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson have played below what we'd usually expect from them, or else this series probably should have been over by now. So maybe the fact that Atlanta has those long athletic wings, like I mentioned, Jalen Johnson, Alexander Walker, and the likes, are slowing them down, right? Which is why I could see them winning in game 6 and taking it to game 7. But at Madison Square Garden, I would probably have to give the advantage to the Knicks in that situation. So we move on to the Orlando Magic and Detroit Pistons. The 8th seed Orlando Magic versus the number 1 seed Detroit Pistons. The Magic are currently leading 3-1 and have the chance to close out tonight in Detroit. What do you have?
The man will go back Orlando if they want to win any series here, bro. I think it's going to be a serious dogfight in Detroit tonight. I think Magic missing Franz Wagner.
Yes.
So that's a big piece for them. We know Paulo Banchero is the main player for them, and he can sometimes create his own shot, and that can be a problem for Detroit, along with Suggs, the point guard. But I feel like it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be home crowd advantage, and I'm rocking with with Detroit, who still can be very dogged on the defensive end and give Orlando Magic a lot of trouble. I think is they're averaging about 11 blocks per game. So yeah, in the interior especially, it's gonna be hard for Orlando Magic to come in. So I would rock with the Detroit Pistons in this one.
I'd have to rock with them with this one as well, just in this game though. However, based on what I've seen in this series thus far, the talent gap, the one seed to 8 seed gap isn't that way in talent at all. And if anything, when I were to pick both starting fives and you'd ask me which one I'd prefer each player,
Mhm.
I'd probably rather Orlando starting five with Bain, Banquero, Fit Suggs, Fit Wagner, and Wendell Carter at the five compared to Duran, who's been very, very underwhelming this series, we must have to say. He's been being outplayed by Wendell Carter, who is somebody who is not as shouldn't be as good as him. I think that Jalen Duran is definitely playing below his potential, right? Cade is holding up his end of the bargain. However, on offense, Detroit is still struggling greatly. Like if it isn't Cade, they struggle to create offense easily. And the likes of Osar Thompson and Tobias Harris aren't pulling their weight as they should. A number one seed losing 3-1 to a number 8 seed in the first round of the playoffs, is something that would be considered a great upset. So the fact that Detroit is even in this position says a lot
Mhm.
about Orlando's talent and a lot about where Detroit is currently. So I think that they'd extend the series, but I would then say that Orlando would close it out in game 6 on their court. So we'll move on to another series that has been nip and tuck. The Toronto Raptors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. That series is currently tied at 2 apiece with game 5 tonight in Cleveland. Cleveland won the first 2 games. Toronto won the last 2 games at home. So neither team has won on the road as yet. Do you see that trend
Nope.
continuing tonight?
Yes.
So you expect Cleveland to
To
win
win
tonight?
100%. Yeah, home court advantage. They're having some niggles with Merrill and Jarrett Allen, who I think they're predicted to start tonight still. So they have their weapons. Merrill has been uh that secret weapon and a kind of way shooting from behind the arc when James Harden and Donovan Mitchell have been cold, and I think he could come up clutch in situations where he's needed. And then Mobley and Jared Allen are defensive beasts, and I think at home with the crowd roaring on, and they could go on a run both offensively and defensively and cause some problems. So for the Toronto Raptors.
Okay, I'm gonna have to roll with the home team again in this series, but just overall reflection on this series is I came into the series thinking that Cleveland probably would advance. It wouldn't be light work because of the talent
Mm-hmm.
that Toronto has at their disposal, the likes of Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, etc. I know that they would have made it difficult, but I just thought that, after so many years of playoff failures, James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, separately, now they're together, I just thought that this would have been it and it would have clicked and they would have been able to advance comfortably past Toronto, but it's been more of the same where we've seen from James Harden over his playoff career. We mentioned a stat off camera, and it would probably have to be fact checked completely, but it's something along the lines of James Harden has more games in the playoffs with turnovers than made field goals, and that is a damning stat for someone who is a primary ball handler, someone who is so great in the regular season at least, and drops to this level in the playoffs. Um, so it just goes to that overall point about Harden's overall legacy, I'd have to say, because if he ends his career without capturing a championship, I think he'd be known as a playoff choker. And maybe that might be an unfair label to him as he's achieved so much. But the facts are the facts, and he's been very bad in the playoffs throughout his entire career at multiple teams. So there's a lot of pressure on him and Donovan Mitchell to perform. tonight and for the rest of the playoffs. So interesting to see how it unfolds. So that is it for the Eastern Conference. We move on to the Western Conference, where 2 of the 4 series have already been clinched, and we'll run through them quickly. We'll start with the number 1 seed OKC Thunder, made light work of the Phoenix Suns in 4 games, a sweep, the only sweep so far in the playoffs. Any thoughts on OKC's dominance just continuing? Jalen Williams is out indefinitely. Not sure if he'll be back for the second round, but he's currently out indefinitely. What are your thoughts on OKC's, dominance?
Well, this next man up over there, as you see, everybody is basically ready. When one man goes down injured, they're having a cold night, there's always someone to step up. The youth and the depth in quality is really incredible. And then it just goes hand in hand with the likes of efficient Shea Gilgis Alexander and a Chet Holmgren. So I feel like everything is working well. They have the formula at the moment with Dagnall and the board and everything. Everything seems to be working well. And it trickles down to the player on the court. They unbeaten at home. You really can't go to OKC and win a game because the crowd is so suffocating and they're so loud and so everything is working well for them, and it's really not much I could say. I think the wheels fall off when something goes bad with Shea.
They're a well-oiled machine, if that is, to be a compliment. They're a well-oiled machine. They play basketball fundamentally, I'd say. Sometimes some may label it as unethical hoops, as the young kids would say on Twitter, because there's a lot of what they'd say foul baiting and over exaggerating the contact. But that is the modern NBA that we're currently in. And Shea Gilgis Alexander definitely deserves the whistle that he gets. They say there's superstar treatment or a superstar whistle. Shea Gilgis Alexander is the current league MVP, the current finals MVP, league champion. He deserves any little whistle that he gets. So aside from that, in the mid-range, from 3, he's improving. The team, Chet Holmgren, I wanted to touch on him as well because he came into the league with Wembanyama, and comparisons with Wembanyama are a bit unfair for him. But that's not a knock on him. It's just a testament to how good and great Wembanyama is, because Chet Holmgren by himself is a superb talent, a unicorn in himself, able to play on both ends, able to hit shots, and has skills in the paint as well. So it's not a knock on him to say that he's not as good as Wembanyama, because he's great and the role that he plays for the Thunder is perfect. So I see no slowing down OKC in the next round, because they're gonna play the winner of the Lakers Rockets series. They may encounter some problems, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. Get ahead of myself as yet when they meet the Spurs. If they are to meet the Spurs, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, if we get there. But I don't see any stopping them for now. So let's move on to the aforementioned San Antonio Spurs, who clinched their series last night against the Portland Trailblazers at home. They had a slight scare earlier on in the series, losing game 2. Wemby went out with a concussion, so the team went through some adversity. They won a game without him. And on the road, they then won with him, coming back from 20 down in the first half, becoming the first ever team in playoff history, or I think in Spurs history, to win a game by 15 plus points where they were down 20 plus points at halftime or something like that. The swing was incredible. So the shooting, we're seeing it from Dylan Harper, we're seeing it from Devin Vassell, we're seeing it from Julian Champagny, Stefan Castle. We're seeing De'Aaron Fox stepping up after he had a disappointing game in the game that they lost. Now Wemby is back. He had 7 blocks in game 3, in game 4, and he had a great game last night as well. So things seem to certainly be looking up with the Spurs, especially considering the Minnesota and Denver series still might have a long way to go. What are your thoughts on the Spurs and what you've seen from them so far in the playoffs?
I mean, they're looking at them, they're really not too far off of an OKC. in terms of the quality and the depth. It's almost every man up for the Spurs as well with the Keldon Johnsons. Defensively, they have it, and then young Ron Harper, Dylan Harper, sorry, is
a beast.
and a floor general as well. You know, he knows how he has IQ on the ball, and I think all that helps his Spurs into to being such a dominant team. So it's not only Wemby. I think everyone knows their role and are happy with their role, and they play perfectly, and it just comes together so well. And with the dominance of Wemby in the paint, on the other end of the floor, attacking on the paint and then defending the paint. Sometimes he even blocking a shot. A man see is like the big bad wolf. A man see him and he turning back, making a U-turn. So is the defense of Wemby is not only blocks, is just the intimidation
Gravity.
factor as well.
Gravity.
So yeah, I could go on about Spurs, but yeah. I looking forward to the matchup with OKC already, bro. I really, it would be something if one of these other teams could knock Spurs or OKC out, but I really don't see any other team stopping OKC and Spurs from reaching the conference finals.
Yeah, we certainly seem to be heading for a collision course of the Thunder versus the Spurs in the Western Conference Finals, unless, as Dopy mentioned, one of them gets upset along the way. Because we could definitely consider Spurs and OKC to be the best two teams in the Western Conference, potentially in the entire NBA at the moment. Before we move on to the other two series, I just wanted to touch on two more things with the Spurs. Coach Mitch Johnson, inexperienced coach, came up under Greg Popovich and the likes, learned everything that he could have known from Goat Pop, and he certainly putting it into play. And earlier on, before Spurs became good again this season, let's say about 2 seasons ago when he originally took over, there was a lot of doubts around him within like Spurs fans, and they persisted. Spurs isn't a team that is known for like getting rid of coaches overly. They definitely like to develop coaches and players. And that touches with the next point that I wanted to make, because during the season when Giannis Antetokounmpo was rumored to be wanting out of Milwaukee, there was a lot of rumors that the Spurs should trade a lot of the young core that they have, including Castle, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, for a Giannis. And at the time, I disagreed with it because I knew or saw some of the potential that was there within these young guys, and I'm so happy that they didn't go through with that short-term thinking. Because this team that is currently here, not just Wemby, as you mentioned, Castle and Vassell and Dylan Harper, Keldon Johnson, Fox, this could potentially be a championship core for the next few years. And as you mentioned, it following the same model as the Thunder. So let's hope we get to see that series in the next round. Moving on to the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets series, which is currently 3-2 to the Timberwolves. However, the Timberwolves are currently without their starting backcourt, Dante DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards. DiVincenzo out with an Achilles tear, would not be back for this playoffs. Anthony Edwards may be back if Minnesota does end up advancing to the next round. However, Denver now has all of the momentum. They are a fitter team at the moment in terms of their stars. Do you see Denver coming from 3-1 down to overcome the Timberwolves?
I might have to roll with Joker now. I might have to roll with him, bro. I mean, DiVincenzo, as much as I didn't give him credit before the start of the series, him along with Anthony Edwards is a lot of points on the bench or off the court, so it would be hard for them to now see how they could fill those shoes with points from
Isomo, who had a 40-pointer the other night. But I mean, that's not sustainable if we're being real. Randall, I don't think they'd be able to produce enough offense
without Anthony Davis for one handling. And I mean, they have Conley, which
Anthony Edwards.
Sorry, they have Conley, who is a veteran floor general. But I just saying, to at least have them moving the ball and with some IQ plays that should have them playing a little better than if he's not on the court. Yeah, I really don't see them hurting the Nuggets in these next two games without someone who could handle the balls, score points, and be that X factor like an Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, losing your starting backcourt, which probably contributes to about 50 points per game, is definitely something hard to make up for. But what I would say is Minnesota has a somewhat of a psychological advantage over Denver, and I want to touch on why. I think it was either game 3 or 2 when the Timberwolves won, and in the post-game press conference, Jaden McDaniels was basically brawling, with his comments about the Nuggets and their inability to defend and call them by name. Jokic, Murray, Gordon, they all can't defend. And he then went out and backed it up on the court. Now, Jaden McDaniels is not Anthony Edwards to be able to replicate the offense that Ant can. But I think that moment has instilled a certain psychological advantage in Minnesota's favor, and I could just see them eking out a win in either game 6 or even game 7, with or without Anthony Edwards, just due to that psychological factor. Also, Rudy Gobert has been doing a very, very good job on Nikola Jokic so far this series. So much so that he's been getting a lot of criticism, a lot more criticism than we've ever seen from Jokic in the media. Because this time last week, we were putting Jokic in some serious conversations with the all-time great centers. But the job that Gobert has done on him over the past few games, would temper those conversations just a bit. He is great, but he's not unstoppable, clearly. So just with that factor, I could see Minnesota winning one of these games. Not sure if it would be tonight, maybe in game 7. But either way, if Denver is to come back from 3-1 down, they're gonna be beaten up ahead of that Spurs series, and they might win, but it's probably a loss in the long run. So we'll move on to the final series of the NBA playoffs so far, and it's the final one from the Western Conference, which currently has the Los Angeles Lakers 3-1 up on the Houston Rockets. Kevin Durant is out again tonight. Austin Reeves may return. Luka Doncic isn't far from a return either. What are your thoughts? How long do you see this series going on? You think it ends tonight?
Lakers in 5.
Lakers in 5.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get that same kind of game from the Rockets. Maybe the likes of Kevin Durant missing help them to play more fluid basketball, and they were in a bit of a dogfight too, because they didn't really want the game to die, and they knew what was at stake. But I feel like the LeBron James and what he has already shown us already for the series, despite some of it being gifted to him, I believe he would overcome whatever the Houston Rockets throw at him, especially if there's an appearance from an Austin Reeves. I think Rui Hachimura and the dominating, who I must give credit to. He has been balling out, especially ever since the Capella attacks.
Yeah.
He has been balling out, and I must say kudos to him.
For sure.
And he's just another reason why I don't feel like the Houston Rockets would have enough to defeat the Lakers tonight, and Lakers in 5.
You put up a compelling argument, and there's not much that I could say to dispute it. What I would say in the Rockets' favor, just like what I mentioned about Jaden McDaniels in the previous series, maybe they don't have a psychological advantage over the Lakers. If anything, the Lakers have a psychological advantage over them, because coming into the series, the Rockets were favorite.
Yep.
But what I wanted to mention is that before tonight's game, Jabari Smith Jr. in the media before the game basically said that their team is better, player for player. Let's say aside from LeBron, their team is better, and you could see where he's coming from.
I go agree.
Also, I think Sengun basically he guaranteed victory tonight. I mean, that's what you're supposed to say if you're asked if you think you're gonna win tonight in a go home game. You're gonna say yes, but the conviction with which he spoke speaks of a man who is confident in their chances tonight. However, with that being said, based on what we've seen so far in the series and with the impending return of Austin Reeves, who adds probably another 15, 20 to 25 points to the Lakers, is already impressive, offense that we've seen run by LeBron James. I don't see a world where Houston travels to Los Angeles tonight and comes out with a victory. So I'm going to have to agree with my partner here and say Lakers in 5. So that rounds up our wraps up our take of the NBA playoffs and its current standings. We are looking forward to those closeout games tonight between Detroit and Orlando and the Lakers and the Rockets. And we will be back next week to discuss those games. Before we go, must highlight our man of the match in our man of the match segment. And this week, I'm going to go for Bruno Fernandes. On Monday, he assisted another goal in United's 2-1 win over Brentford to take him 1 assist away and 2 away from breaking the all-time Premier League single-season assist record of 20, currently held by Thierry Henry and Kevin De Bruyne. It's also the most assists in a single season for a United player with 19. Previous record was held by David Beckham with 15. So Bruno basically extends his record. He has also now recorded a goal and assist in 7 consecutive Premier League games, and he is the first Manchester United player to achieve that since Robin van Persie in 2012-2013. Finally, he has reached 140 goal involvements in the Premier League. That tally matches Cristiano Ronaldo's tally for Manchester United as well. However, Fernandes has done it in 11 fewer games. So shout out to Bruno Fernandes, a contender for Player of the Year in the Premier League, despite United not being in contention for any titles.
My man in match, Alright, my man in match. 220 runs, over 304 balls in the 4-day competition, regional cricket against Leeward Islands. 7 hours, 220 runs, as I said. 29 fours, 2 sixes. Joshua De Silva is my man of the match. And with that being said, I think he is doing enough to warrant a call up or recall to the West Indies test team. And I think he has a show to open the button in the test team. I think I don't see why not. Last season he ended second, just behind Jason Mohammed for the most runs. He wasn't called up. I mean, different coach. Sammy took over, he was dropped by Andre Coley. But yeah, I think up to this point, counting last season and this season's knocks, I think by the end of the season, Joshua De Silva should be getting a call from Darren Sammy.
I don't see why not, and we had this discussion off camera as well. The West Indies are going to be taking on Sri Lanka in June to test in Antigua. The last time that West Indies played a test, the openers were John Campbell and Brandon King. So I don't see why Joshua De Silva has been left out of the team for so long, and they've been switching so many different persons as the wicketkeeper, which doesn't necessarily make sense when they had someone stable in De Silva. You can see why he was dropped then, or you understand why he was dropped?
Well, yes, at one point, yes, I could understand why he was dropped initially by Coley. He wasn't having the best of times with the bat, and maybe he needed a rest. Meanwhile, Imlak was having a decent time with the bat in the regional competition with Guyana, and was a good glove man as well. Some would argue a better glove man than Joshua De Silva.
What would you say?
I think so. But I think the sample size is too small for
especially on the international level.
Right. But with the bat, he has looked out of his depth. He really hasn't scored any sort of meaningful runs apart from maybe 30 in a second innings where we probably drew the match. But apart from that, he hasn't set the wall, like he hasn't hit his maiden test 50. And I think I might need to be fact checked, but at the same time, I don't think
Joshua Silva.
Tevin Imlach.
Mark.
Yeah, I don't think I need to be fact checked, but I feel like Imlach hasn't shown us why he took the place of Joshua De Silva, especially
His high school.
especially with the bat. And I think Joshua De Silva has shown us, at least in the regional competition, that he is bang in form, and we should take the opportunity and capitalize on this sort of form and hope that it could translate into the international game.
I don't see why not. Joshua De Silva is 27 years old, and if you take a look around the rest of the cricketing world and their test teams, something that would stand out to you is the consistency with the selection of the names, right? And if you were to go even deeper, like and check West Indies, I feel like we have about 50 players that we choose from and then pick the best 15 for every different series. Because if you look at India's wicketkeeper, you would know that it's Pant. England's goalkeeper, wicketkeeper, you'd know that it's Jamie Smith. For Australia, you'd know that it's Carey. So there's a level of consistency there and predictability. But with us, who knows who's gonna be lining up when we take on Sri Lanka in June. So it just
Craig Brathwaite again.
you know what I'm saying? So it just ties in with the fall from grace that we've seen, and not necessarily to compare ourselves to the big three, England, Australia, and India, but that is the level which we should be aspiring to. That is the level which we were, and that we should be. So, we just require some consistency in the selection, so that hopefully we could start to get better results, starting against Sri Lanka, which is a team that we should be beating at home in a two-match test series.
Yep. At the Antigua.
Sorviv Richard Stadium.
So yeah, we should be able to at least eke out 2 draws if we don't have enough to win the game.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
I don't see why not. So that brings us to the end of today's episode of Global Sports from a Caribbean perspective, where we break down the best games, the best teams, the best players, and provide you with the best takes on global sports from a Caribbean perspective. I was your host today, Shabba, and I was here with
Dops.
Now please remember to like, share, and subscribe on all platforms to Global Sports from a Caribbean perspective. We have a lot more in store for you coming up, including live streams. So look out. Stay tuned on Global.
Global.